The morning sun had not yet even thought of peek over the edge of the distant hills when the story of a remarkable man named Jed began to unfold in the quiet corners of the countryside. Jed was a poor mountaineer who spent his days wandering the rugged terrain, deeply devoted to his family, but constantly struggling with the simple, heavy burden of keeping them fed and comfortable. He was a man of immense patience and a gentle soul, one who looked at the world with a kind of honest wonder that time and poverty could not diminish. One beautiful, ordinary afternoon, while he was out in the woods attempting to shoot at some food to bring home for the family dinner, a strange and marvelous thing occurred. His shot missed the game, but struck the earth with an unexpected force, and up through the ground there commenced a bubbling crude, a thick and dark substance that poured forth like a hidden fountain from the depths of the soil. Oil, that is, the very thing that people in the big cities called black gold or Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, the news spread across the valleys like wildfire, and Jed was suddenly a millionaire, a man with more wealth than he had ever dreamed existed in the entire world. The kinfolk and neighbors gathered around his small cabin, looking at the bubbling well, and then at Jed with wide, astonished eyes. They all said that Jed must move away from there immediately, for a man of his newfound fortune belonged in a place where the world was wide and full of bright opportunities. They said that California was the absolute place he ought to be, a land of sunshine and orange groves where life flowed as smooth as honey. So, with heavy hearts but bright hopes, they loaded up their trusty old truck with all their earthly belongings, securing the old rocking chairs and the pots and pans, and they moved to Beverly Hills. That is, a magnificent neighborhood filled with shimmering swimming pools and famous movie stars, a place entirely different from the quiet mountains they had always called home. The transition to this new world was filled with a gentle, humorous confusion that kept the family thoroughly entertained and grounded. On one particular morning, the bright stars were still hanging in the dark velvet sky, and the silver moon was shining down on the grand mansion when a sudden racket broke the peaceful silence of the early hours. Granny, the fierce and loving matriarch of the household, was already up and moving about with the energy of a hummingbird, her voice echoing through the grand hallways. She called out loudly to know what all the racket was about, declaring that it was high time to go to work, and calling the younger ones lazybones for clinging to their soft blankets. Jethro, her strapping and well-meaning nephew, groaned softly from beneath his quilts, protesting that it was only 5 o'clock in the morning and that the birds had not even begun to chirp. Granny, however, would hear nothing of it, snapping back with her favorite wisdom that it was always better late than never. Jethro tried to argue that he was a big city boy now and that nothing in the world should be able to get him out of bed at such an ungodly hour, but the mere mention of breakfast changed his mind in an instant. He sat up quickly, declaring that he was completely ready, causing Granny to remark with a chuckle that for a city boy, he certainly moved pretty good when his stomach was involved. She informed him that Uncle Jed was already sitting at the table, waiting patiently as he always did, embodying the quiet discipline of the hills. Just then, Ellie Mae came walking into the room, her long hair slightly tumbled from sleep, but her face bright with youth. Granny greeted her warmly, and Annie Mae responded that she was indeed up, though she confessed she sure was sleepy. Granny looked at the young ones with a fond but stern expression, telling them that they wouldn't have this trouble if they simply went to bed at a decent hour instead of trying to stay up and watch the wonders of the night. Jethro defended himself, claiming he had gone to bed at 9 o'clock sharp, which should have given him plenty of rest. Granny told him to take his rooster and put him outside where he belonged, and then ordered them all to have some breakfast so they could go down and get the Clampett enterprises ready for business. Jethro, showing a bit of his newly acquired knowledge about the city, pointed out that the bank building would not even be open yet, as the sophisticated folks in Beverly Hills did not get up this early in the morning. Granny was skeptical, wondering aloud if they truly slept away the best part of the day, when a sudden knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She asked Jethro if he knew who that was at the door, and when Jethro looked puzzled, she revealed with great pride that it was Mr. Drysdale, their wealthy and esteemed banker, who was riding into town with them. Jethro was completely astonished that a distinguished man like Mr. Drysdale would be out at 5 o'clock in the morning, but Granny proudly explained that he had not stayed up half the night like the young ones had. He knew, just as they did, that this was the best part of the day, and that it was the early bird that catches the worm. According to Granny, Mr. Drysdale was up, ready to go, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, a true example of city success built on country hours. However, when the front door opened, the reality was a bit more humorous than Granny imagined. Mr. Drysdale stumbled into the warmth of the mansion, looking completely dazed and disoriented as he muttered to himself, asking where he was and what had happened to the night. Granny greeted him cheerfully, reminding him that he had called her and asked to join them, and she inquired what the trouble was. Mr. Drysdale, trying to maintain his dignity despite his overwhelming exhaustion, replied that there was no trouble at all, though he wondered why they needed to open up the bank building so early just so they could go to work. He looked out the window, noting that the stars were still out and the moon was shining brightly, which felt rather unusual for a business day. Jed smiled his warm, slow smile, remarking that the early air does make a person feel good, and he quoted a bit of old mountain wisdom, stating that it always says up at 5, "You're sure to thrive, but if you wait till 6, you are in a terrible fix." Granny nodded in agreement, squinting out into the dim twilight to determine what kind of a day it was going to be. After a moment of careful observation, she proclaimed with absolute certainty that the weather looked rotten, and she announced that she had best go check the weather signs more closely in the backyard. Jed watched her go, uttering his familiar phrase of astonishment, "Well, doggy," before turning his attention back to their guest. He told Mr. Drysdale that he was truly the first city fella he had ever seen with enough gumption to get going before the sun was up. Mr. Drysdale, eager to please his largest depositor, quickly adopted the phrase, agreeing that up at 5 meant you would thrive, while waiting till 6 put you in a fix, claiming that was exactly what he always said to himself. Jed was deeply impressed, declaring that they were truly kindred spirits in a world that often felt too fast and complicated. However, Granny returned from her weather checking just in time to correct him, stating that Jed was wrong because her signs now showed it was going to be a fine and beautiful day after all. Mr. Drysdale was relieved, and Granny, ever the hospitable host, asked if he had already had his breakfast. Jed gently reminded her that a busy man like Mr. Drysdale had surely eaten, but Granny insisted that since this man kept country hours, he deserved some fresh mountain comfort. She offered him a hot cup of coffee, which Mr. Drysdale accepted with great enthusiasm, saying he would absolutely love it. As he reached for the cup, Jed noticed something peculiar and pointed out that Mr. Drysdale still had on his night clothes, his pajamas silk and matching under his heavy coat. Mr. Drysdale looked down, startled, and explained nervously that he had been in such a hurry and didn't want to turn on the lights and wake his beloved wife. Jed, misunderstanding the modern marital dynamics of the city, nodded sagely and remarked that he reckoned Mr. Drysdale beat her up regularly in the mornings. Mr. Drysdale, shocked for a second, laughed nervously and said no, but admitted it was a great idea to get up ahead of her to secure some peace. He gladly escaped the conversation by heading toward the kitchen to have that fresh coffee, while Jed promised they would be right in with him after a few moments of preparation. Meanwhile, over at the grand building of the bank, the hours ticked away until it was 8:30 in the morning. Jane Hathaway, the loyal and efficient secretary, walked into the executive office only to find Mr. Drysdale already sitting there, looking exhausted but desperate. She cried out his name in surprise, asking what he was doing there at this hour since the bank did not officially open for some time. Mr. Drysdale looked up with heavy eyes and informed her that he had been there since 5:30 in the morning. When Jane asked how that was possible, he explained that he had to open up the entire building early so the Clampetts could go to work, as they had decided that from now on, they wanted to start their business day at 5 o'clock sharp. Jane looked at him closely and noticed that he was still wearing his pajamas under his desk. She expressed her deep concern, pleading with him to put on a proper suit immediately, because if an important client or an inspector came in, they would surely misunderstand the situation. Mr. Drysdale, too tired to care, asked what they would think, and Jane explained with a flush of professional pride that they might think he had hired her for reasons other than her secretarial authority and high intellectual capability. Mr. Drysdale shrugged, remarking dryly that as a matter of fact, he did hire her because she worked cheap, a comment that made Jane roll her eyes in mild annoyance. She reminded him that she had helped the Clampetts stay comfortable on the 5th floor for a whole year, but Mr. Drysdale countered by saying that if they kept getting him up at 5 every morning, he was going to have to find a way to get rid of them today. He announced that he was bringing in a hired gun, a special troubleshooter, to handle the situation. Jane was surprised, but Mr. Drysdale assured her that this man was the absolute best in the business, describing him as cunning, cruel, ruthless, unprincipled, and conniving, a truly beautiful man for a difficult job. He added that the man's name was Homer Bedloe. Right on cue, the door to the office opened and a sharp, severe-looking man stepped inside. Jane greeted him politely, wishing him a good morning and calling him by his name, Mr. Bedloe. The man stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing as he demanded to know how she knew his name. Jane smiled professionally, explaining that he fit Mr. Drysdale's description perfectly. Mr. Drysdale welcomed him warmly, telling him to sit down. Jane, curious about this strange visitor, asked if he and Mr. Drysdale were old friends. Homer Bedloe responded coldly that he did not have any friends, as friendship was a liability in his line of work. He expressed his sincere hope that Mr. Drysdale would find his work pleasing, explaining that he would like nothing more than to give up his current job on the railroad and stay on here permanently, as a bank offered wonderful opportunities for a man of his unique talents. Mr. Drysdale agreed completely, noting that a bank allowed a man to foreclose on mortgages and repossess cars and furniture. Homer Bedloe smiled a dark smile, adding that he bet it was a great kick to go and get a television set from a family just when the children were sitting down to watch their absolute favorite show. As he sat down, Bedloe began looking around the office suspiciously, checking under the desk and behind the curtains. Jane asked what he was looking for, and Bedloe replied that he was checking for snipers and movie traps, explaining that it was a force of habit because he didn't get to be this old and mean by being careless in unfamiliar rooms. Mr. Drysdale smiled, confirming that he was indeed Milburn Drysdale and that Bedloe was exactly the man he needed. Bedloe looked at him intently and remarked that he would have known him anywhere because he was the spitting image of his father. Mr. Drysdale was touched, asking if Bedloe knew his dad, and Bedloe replied that he worshipped his father because he was the absolute meanest man he had ever known in his entire life. Mr. Drysdale beamed with pride, saying that his dad would have absolutely loved hearing him say that. Jane, standing by, could not help but interrupt, expressing her amazement that a father would love being called mean. Bedloe admitted that he had never actually met the old gentleman in person because he was gone by the time Bedloe started working around those parts, but his reputation was legendary. Mr. Drysdale offered to see if he could find a picture of him in his files, while Bedloe recalled that his very first job was working as an office boy for Mr. Drysdale's father 50 years ago. Mr. Drysdale expressed surprise that his father ever let such a talented man get away, suggesting that Bedloe and his dad must have been two of a kind. Bedloe clarified that 50